we are back still with EconoChat Let's Talk Business with Mr. Daniel Steinman, and we are talking about the oil and gas exploration in Namibia, how the hype was created and how it all came to a standstill. I would use that term because we are not sure what will be happening in the future, but also looking at how the oil majors look at Namibia at this moment.
That's a very, very important consideration. I want to use Guyana as a comparative example.
Yeah.
Guyana, that small country at the northern tip of or northern part of South America, next to Suriname. Did you know that you can go to Suriname and talk to the people on the street? Because they're also Dutch descendants. So they speak a type of Afrikaans there in Suriname.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't know.
No, I've got a friend who goes there fairly regularly. And when he got off the aeroplane, he was amazed to hear that everybody around him spoke almost type of Afrikaans, old Dutch Afrikaans. And they could understand him and he could understand them.
Okay, no, dan gaan ons daar naartoe.
Dan gaan ons. Okay, so this is where Guyana is. Now, the part of the hype that we had to deal with 2 years ago was based on this thing. Look at what has oil done to the Guyana economy. But, and this is now how the companies view us. This is the question that we're asking, or the consideration. What they don't tell you is that the first exploration in Guyana started in 1961. So it was a frontier territory at that stage.
Yeah.
For 30 years, until the early 1990s. Just like we are now a frontier territory. And the oil majors see offshore Namibia as frontier area, meaning that we've done our homework in terms of exploration. The two-dimensional data, the 3D seismic data, the morphology, and that fancy word simply means what does the rock look like below the surface. The morphology of the substrate. We have a very good grasp on what's cooking there below the surface. But we still have not found that one pocket of oil. We found good oil, light sweet crude it's called, which is very similar in texture to what in the United States they call Texas intermediary or light Texas intermediary. It's a sweet, and again you can't go and drink it. But in oil parlance, it's not, the acid level is low.
Yeah.
That is what they mean by what is a sweet oil. So you use a different refining process, and it is slightly cheaper than when you have oil or crude with high acidity. And you have to make this distinction, but it's a chemical distinction. So you've got a couple of considerations here. In terms of the technicalities, one, the very large part is engineering considerations. As you can imagine from what I've explained, if you have to work in water depths of 1,600 meters, it's more than 1.5 kilometer deep water, and you have to work another 2 kilometers in the rock below where the bottom of the sea starts. So you're looking at wells that are anything between 4 and 5 kilometers deep from the point where the oil rig floats. So you can see technically it is very complicated. And we have basically got to that point, the end of the first 30-year cycle, only 3 or 4 or 5 years ago, post-COVID. Whereas with Guyana, they were at that point when we became independent. So they are now at the point where they can actually, where the big companies have established the infrastructure, that they know where the oil is. The wells have been drilled, the pipes are there, the bladders. Again, it's very interesting. They don't just pipe this all out, if it's in the sea, they put it in what is called a bladder. You know, like a bladder, a normal bladder. It's a big rubber balloon.
Okay.
Very strong, big rubber balloon. If I say big, massive.
Massive.
The size of a soccer field.
Oh wow.
That as they fill it with crude, it remember, oil is less dense than water.
Yes.
So oil
yes,
floats.
yeah.
If you pour oil in the water, you can always see it at the top.
Floating at the top, yeah.
So as they fill this big bladder with 500 million liters of oil, it floats. And they then put a very powerful boat on one end, a tugboat or a couple of tugboats,
that will pull it.
and they pull it wherever they want it. You know, Guyana's oil goes to Texas, in the opposite side of the Gulf of America. Because all the big refineries are in Texas.
Yes, yes.
And this stuff just goes into that big bladder, and so you don't need piping and you don't need all the other stuff. You basically need the rig and the well and the pipes to get it to the top, and you put it in there, and you tow this thing wherever you want it.
Yeah.
Probably a similar scenario that is going to develop in Namibia. None of the oil majors have made up their minds on, are they going to bring it ashore? Which I doubt very much. It's 160 to 180 kilometers. It is too far.
Yeah.
The natural conditions in the South Atlantic are adverse. Remember in the past I told you a 6 meter swell that you have to deal with. Lutherits, wind, that sort of those conditions. It'll probably go into a bladder, and from there to wherever it must be refined, which will not be in Namibia. Why? The market is too small.
Very small.
It must be refined where the market is, like in Angola, possibly South Africa.
Yeah.
And then just one last thing with Guyana comparison is that, so from 1961 until about 1996, 35 years before you got to the point where they actually produced oil, to where they are now a major producer, it's another 25, 30 years on. And this is, if we want to have, if we really want to understand what's happening in Namibia and what's going to happen, we need to view this industry in those very long time horizons.
So that means that it's not going to happen today.
Definitely not.
Okay, well, on that note, we unfortunately have to say goodbye to you. Thank you so much for tuning in, and thank you so much for Mr. Daniel Steinman. Of course, we will meet again next week, same time, same place.